Greetings, kindred! Whew! Is it hot in here, or is it just Persephone's curious floral explosion? Man, that sounded so wrong. Don't be fooled! I know, I'm back in my familiar surroundings, and you're like, oh, you must be back from holiday. Nope. I am in fact filming this prior to holiday. I am also very impressed with my forethought and foresight and getting aheadedness. Those are all words used entirely correctly. Episode 90 left us with a lot of questions about Persephone's powers and how they react to various things in the world around her. But as we need more story in order for those answers to be revealed, let's focus on the curious case of the 19-year-old who is the only one who seems to be willing to put their big god pants on and set some boundaries. My name is Kiri Callaghan, and today we're going to talk about the many-faceted problem when only one party in a relationship is willing to buy tickets at the responsibility station. Before we jump on our main topic, I want to rewind a little bit to episode 89, where our heroes were flying through the air with the greatest of ease. Daring young gods on the flying trap. No. Start again. So at the start of episode 89, Hades flat out asks Persephone if she wants to be a member of TGOEM, which I keep wanting to call Tagoem. It's not a thing, I know. Which, to ask that question, bit cheeky, bit overly bold, one might even say, but you know what? Good on Hades for being direct for once, because I know that's not easy for him. It's scary, to be honest. To be direct is very scary, especially if you're used to going around things, and he's got a lot of reasons, traumatic-wise, why that's not an easy route for him, and why it's not the route he thinks to walk first. So, bearing that all in mind as we move forward. But still, we do have to talk about it. I do understand why Hades behaves the way he does. And I know we kind of want to give him a pass because he has a lot of trauma. But I always want to reiterate that your trauma is not a reason to disrespect, disregard, or you're continuing a cycle of abuse by using your trauma as an excuse for why you do not great things. I can't not think of how happy he was that she didn't catch him giving her special treatment. That bothers me. My point being is, yes, Hades has a lot of trauma that feeds into why he does things the way he does, and he's gonna have to work through that as the story progresses. Why I bring it up is I want to make sure that we know it's not excused. Just because you know why something happens does not excuse it. And we see a lot of these same behaviors in people who don't have his background. There were many, and I will say most of them fell more on the masculine spectrum. Many people I met in my youth, and still meet today, even though I'm old and soon to die, who have a lot of these similar behaviors. Where, look at our rom-coms, so many of them, it's changing slowly, but so many of them feed into this sort of toxic idea of what's romantic. That big grand gestures that might override what someone else wants or needs is okay because it's romantic. No. With all apologies to Peter Cetera, it does not matter if you did it all for the glory of love, if you're still disrespecting someone's boundaries or wishes that they have said. Even if you suspect it's not actually what they want, they have to actually say what they want. I know, direct communication, what? Anyway, the whole point was I wanted to bring attention to the fact that Persephone does not say yes, and she does not say no. She is very conflicted about it, and she states rather plainly that she's still trying to figure out if it was her choice or if people just told her it was her choice. Now, why do I want to bring this up? While it might be blurred and convoluted because she is conflicted, because she didn't say yes or no, this is still a boundary. It might be less clear, but it's still a boundary. Persephone didn't say she wanted to stay, but she also didn't say she wanted to leave. This is something she needs space on. Plain and simple. True, it's not a no, which means maybe in the future it might be a yes, but you need to not push it. This person is clearly conflicted. You do not want to get together with someone who was pressured into it because they were worried they were gonna hurt your feelings, or because you took a I don't know to mean yes or no. No answer's been given. We think that like, oh, well, she's leaning this way. Doesn't matter. Until that decision's been made, does not matter which way she's leaning. And this is not a decision that should be made by anyone but Persephone, especially since she has a lot of feelings about the people who she feels got her into it. This needs to be her decision and her decision alone. It can't be, well, I was pushed into it and then I was also pushed to get out of it. No, bad, 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 bad. Why I'm putting such an emphasis here is because on this reason alone, Hades should be giving her space. In the same way, when asking consent for anything, you should receive a clear yes or green light, because that's a boundary. Do not cross it until you have been given a green light. This should be something that Hades can use to set boundaries for himself until Persephone says otherwise. But instead, in episode 90, Persephone is the only one setting boundaries. She initially brings up that they should be setting boundaries, and Hades sort of looks like he just stepped in a pile of poo. She also doesn't look very comfortable, but she knows it's what she needs to do. When she sets down texting limits, he pushes back so that she has to explain it, which while I do understand wanting to know the reasoning, and that Persephone does have a point that really, like, nothing platonic could possibly happen via text message with them after 9 p.m. Hades, you don't need a reason for the boundary. You don't. She says this is her boundary, you give it to her, no questions asked. She says no touching, and you can kind of feel him sort of shrink a little inside himself and just, no alone time, and he questions it again, and she underlines that boundary. They've nearly kissed multiple times, which would not only be a violation of her scholarship, which she has stated she's not sure how she feels about, so therefore it's not a we can violate this, and even then I'm sure she very much wants to be conscious about it. She has a lot of feelings about her scholarship because of her sexual assault. On top of that, it very much seems like she doesn't want to blatantly disregard it. It seems like she would at least prefer to make the decision of I want to leave and then be with somebody, as opposed to it being the reason she's essentially kicked out. Also, on top of that, the fact that they've nearly kissed 3 times makes her an accessory to him cheating on Minthy. He asks if there is any other way for them to go about this, and she directly asks for feedback, which he does not give. He freezes up again, and rather than saying anything about his own mindset, like stating some of his own boundaries, he could also tell her he needs to clear things up with Minthy, which should not be dependent on what Persephone chooses to do in regards to her scholarship. In the same way she feels about her scholarship, he, at least so far, has exhibited that's how he feels about Minthy. He's not ready to leave, but he's not sure he wants to stay. They're actually in a very parallel situation, except that he's far more willing to sort of blur the lines about what's appropriate than she is. And the poor guy is freezing up. I do acknowledge he is in a difficult situation, I do. But part of that freezing up is likely caused from the same reason he froze up when Minthy came to him that night in the rain. Ultimately, Hades struggles with strong emotions, whether they're his own or someone else's. Even more than that, Hades is deeply afraid of being alone. So he's fighting wanting to tell her how he feels, knowing that it might make her own decision harder, but also knowing that she still might not choose to leave her scholarship. And even if she does, it doesn't mean she'll end up with him. And while things with Minthy are toxic, messy, and not what he wants ultimately, it's still safe because it's what he knows. Which is why, even though he's a kind and I would argue good person, his brain is comfortable blurring the line with Persephone while he's still exclusively dating someone else. It feels safe, one foot in one boat and one on the other, rather than having to swim into deep waters to get to one, so to speak, where he might drown in between, or that boat might leave without him. Fear makes us comfortable doing things that intellectually we would never imagine ourselves doing. So here's the issue, or, well, there's a few of them. 1, setting boundaries should be a joint effort. It should never be completely on one person because 2 people have to abide by them. While boundaries should be accepted, it should still be a conversation of how that makes the other person feel. Because if you have just one person setting boundaries and the other person not really engaging in the conversation, it's unlikely that person is going to end up respecting those boundaries. Setting boundaries should be a joint effort, even if it's just one person who needs those boundaries. It should be a conversation of, I need this, okay, this is how I will support you in that. Number 2, not only should it be a conversation between two people rather than just one person saying things and the other one shutting down, is it becomes a bigger problem when those parties aren't equals. Persephone is not seen as an equal by Hades. We've seen this. She has not been treated or respected as one. This makes it worse that she's the only person setting boundaries because it makes it far more unlikely that those boundaries will be respected by Hades. It would be like you giving your parent a curfew. They don't recognize your authority, so it makes any boundary you set kind of seem unreal. Not that Hades is acting like her father, but he does consistently seem to treat her like a child, or like she needs to be taken care of, that she's lesser, like she's this delicate thing. And as we are starting to get more and more hints of, based on distancing from Wrath and etc., Persephone is not a delicate little child who needs to be protected. She needs an equal partner, and she needs a friend. And the third problem is these boundaries aren't actually resolving anything. It's putting a big old cold turkey band-aid on a problem with no real conversation, which is sort of connected to the first one. The point being, this sort of solution never really goes well, because you're not addressing the problem, you're addressing the symptoms. So instead of really solving anything, it just results in a lot of internal screaming. Oh! And look, going to her home 5 minutes after the goodbye, despite that it's also Artemis's house and that no men are allowed, and while this boundary wasn't explicitly said in this current meeting, maybe he should have just texted her if he wanted to talk more about it, rather than going over to her house, which could look suspicious even if Hestia wasn't there, but alas no. And thus Hestia opens the door and hijinks shall ensue. Fast passers, keep thy lips closed. We are trying to remain accessible to all. Don't think I don't see those little hinty hints you leave in the comments. You have not gone unseen! As always, Kindred, leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below of what will be bent, what will be broken, what will explode in our protagonists' faces, and how they will overcome those explosions, I guess. If you like the general cut of my gibberish, please subscribe if you haven't, and you can also join me on my Patreon, where you and I and others like us can be ridiculous. And also you get cool song downloads and all that jazz. Oh, I need to upload one of those. Have I done it? Hopefully by this I will have uploaded it. Keep on the windy side of care, Kindred, and until next time, stay curious.